Now, when I asked for permission or when I wanted to go across line of control, it was only because I felt that in case we cannot undo things, Kargil sector, then we will have to have what was our other alternative.
This is General V.P. Malik, the Chief of Army Staff during the Kargil conflict, who was in favor of crossing the line of control.
In 1998, India and Pakistan had carried out nuclear tests, and there had been sanctions imposed by most of the Western countries. Both India and Pakistan were at that time, because of the tests that they had carried out, were considered to be rogue nations, if I can use that word.
Why was India being called a rogue state by the world? The story begins 12 months ago. In the early afternoon of May 11, 1998, a group of reporters were hurriedly summoned to 7 Racecourse Road, the Prime Minister's residence in the heart of Delhi. Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee would soon emerge and deliver a short address to the nation.
At 15:45 hours, India conducted 3 underground nuclear tests in the Pokhran-II.
As expected, 2 weeks later, Pakistan conducted its own nuclear tests. Nuclear South Asia was now a reality. Vajpayee rightfully got full credit for the 1998 nuclear tests, but the truth is that India's nuclear program has been one of its most tightly guarded secrets. In 1974, Prime Minister Indira Gandhi ordered India's first nuclear test in the Pokhran Desert, but the international community slammed sanctions and Mrs. Gandhi was forced to retreat. Towards the end of his flailing premiership, Rajiv Gandhi gave fresh life to India's nuclear program. Then Defence Secretary Naresh Chandra was put in charge. His team included V.S. Arunachalam, then head of the Defence Research and Development Organization, renowned nuclear scientists like P.K. Iyengar, R. Chidambaram, Anil Kakotkar, Missile Man APJ Abdul Kalam and others. Naresh Chandra made sure that the funding for India's nuclear program continued secretly. Nothing was put on the books.
What happened in the winter, December of 1995, when the initial story was that Narasimha Rao had planned nuclear tests and tunnels had been cleaned up in Pokhran, but pulled back at the last moment, probably because of American pressure. That was the initial story. But there have been many interpretations of that story subsequently. My own view is that he had never meant to test. India was not ready yet to test. A few more things had to be done. So he pulled a fast one on the Americans because there was a lot of pressure from the Americans. So it does look like this was some kind of a operation to make the Americans believe that he was about to test, but to not do so under pressure, to make the Americans complacent, that they had been able to use pressure to get India to pull back. And now that India had pulled back, it was unlikely that India will again test because they had shown that they were susceptible to American pressure.
But what really pushed India across the nuclear threshold was the reaffirmation of 2 global treaties: the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, the NPT, and the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty, the CTBT. In 1995, the NPT was indefinitely extended, meaning only the existing 5 nuclear powers would still be considered legitimate nuclear powers. The following year, there would be immense pressure on India to sign the CTBT. A signature would mean that India could no longer conduct a nuclear test. So when Vajpayee became Prime Minister in 1996, amongst his first decisions was to authorize a test. But his government fell in 13 days. Then Vajpayee returned to power in 1998 and immediately reaffirmed his earlier decision. For the next 2 months, Indian scientists at Pokhran and a handful of military officials worked in complete secrecy. The passage of American spy satellites over the Indian subcontinent was studied carefully so that the CIA did not pick up what was happening in the Thar Desert. The drilling of deep tunnels on the test site was done only at night. All scientists wore army fatigues by day. Not a single pot-bellied scientist was included in the team so as not to give the game away. Everyone had code names. Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam, for instance, was called Major General Prithviraj. Instead of an elaborate convoy of vehicles, only 4 army trucks were used to transport equipment. India had now become the world's 6th declared nuclear weapon state. An angry world, led by the US and Japan, slammed sanctions on India.
I have decided to impose economic sanctions against India. I have long supported deepening the relations between the United States and India. This is a deeply disappointing thing for me personally.
My mortal fear was that the bleeding on the foreign exchange front would create all kinds of problems and will create a real crisis in our economy as it did in 1991. So that was the challenge. Now the drying up of the development aid that we were getting, the drying up of the private investment that we were getting, the stark reality that we could not have gone to the IMF for a loan as we did in 1991 or earlier in 1982. In August 1998, we decided to approach the NRIs and persons of Indian origin through what we called the Resurgent India bonds. I decided that we'll raise foreign exchange through these bonds. India has never raised sovereign bonds, never issued sovereign bonds. So we were not going to issue sovereign bonds. It was a bond which was issued by the State Bank of India, and it was limited only to the NRIs and PIOs. They were supposed to contribute to it. Now, you will be surprised to know, I mean, this is all part of history, nobody remembers it now, that we had this window open for 14 days. This is what we decided. Within a week, so much money flowed in that we decided to close the window on the 10th day because we had already received $4.25 billion. And this was the turning point as far as confidence in India is concerned. This plus a number of other steps that we took, which was to shore up domestic demand. We decided that we will encourage domestic demand, which was a huge unmet domestic demand. We'll encourage domestic demand, we'll encourage private investment. Now, in order to encourage domestic demand, we took to various measures like the National Highway Program, the Rural Roads Program, reform in the IT sector, telecom, projects in railways, ports, everywhere the economy got moving. Now that created a lot of domestic demand, and ultimately that is what helped us to take off.
Only a few months later, Vajpayee would board a bus to Pakistan. This would be India's valiant effort at peacemaking with its hostile neighbor.